Good evening, everyone. Super excited to introduce you today to Julia, a resident physician at UCLA Health. I'm super excited, super honored to have you today, Julia, sharing your time with us. And yeah, I will pass it on to you so you can kick it off from here. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. It is nice to get to meet you guys virtually. I am very excited to kind of share with you a bit about what it's like to work in healthcare. Um, I am a physician, and I'll kind of talk about that path and how I got here, all things of that sort. But I also wanted to share with you what some of the paths my friends have taken that are also in healthcare, just so you have a good sense of kind of like all of the different options, because healthcare is obviously an enormous industry and there's a lot of teamwork involved, and that requires lots of different roles and lots of different people and different types of roles cater to different strengths. So I just want to be able to kind of showcase all the awesome things that healthcare has to offer. So I'm excited to share with all of you. And if you have any questions at any point, and you want to raise your hand or you want to just unmute and say, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" I'm totally open to hearing them throughout, or if you want to write them down. I do have a lot of slides. I will try to get through them as quickly as I can without being totally overwhelming. And then from there, we can do some questions afterwards if you don't feel comfortable interrupting. But seriously, it's totally fine. I want this to be, engaging for you and a good opportunity for you to learn quite a bit. So don't be shy about it at all. I'd love to answer all of your questions. So, first thing is, what are we going to cover today? So, some big kind of questions. What types of careers can you pursue in the healthcare field? How do I choose? What's the path to some of these careers? What are our jobs like on a daily basis? Why do we love the fields that we do? And then, how can you prepare to join the healthcare field? So, I asked some of my wonderful friends to kind of help add a lot of color to this story about all the different things that we can do. So I'm here to talk about my experience being a physician, but I have gotten some slides and some feedback from some of my wonderful colleagues across a whole array of healthcare specialties. So you can hear about lots of different experiences. And this kind of stemmed from something that I found challenging when I was growing up. I didn't feel like anyone gave me many options about what I could do if I liked science. Everyone was like, "Oh, if you like science, you should be a doctor." And I just wanted to make sure that I got to share with all of you that being a doctor is just one of so many different paths in healthcare, which is why I recruited lots of different people in healthcare to share their experiences with you. Um, I love what I do. I think all of these individuals also love what they do, which is why I've asked them to kind of comment. And hopefully, this can be informative and a reminder that we all work together. So, first, I'm going to talk about my story before we get to some of the others. When I was younger, as you can see here on the left, this is me and my sisters. I somehow decided that I wanted to be a doctor. And nobody in my family had ever been in medicine. My parents didn't really know where this interest came from, but they were like, "Sure, okay, sounds good." And they let me kind of explore that path on my own. And once I got to high school, I started to do more prep work towards making that path happen for me. As I mentioned, I feel like when I said, "Oh, I really like biology, I like science," everyone said, go to medical school, which is great. And I'm glad that I did. But I kind of only was really exposed to what that path would look like for me. And so when I was in high school, I went to high school in New York State. And there I was in a special program that worked with one of our state universities to get high schoolers engaged in science and medical research. And so I participated in that for 3 years, working with someone in a psychology lab and learning about kind of doing science research. And that got me excited about kind of doing the same thing in college. So when I got to college, I decided I actually wanted to focus on something else. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to be a doctor anymore. And I decided to major in music. And I did some work in music and it was really fun. And I have lots of great experiences and memories from that. But after about 4 years of that, I decided that I was actually right the first time and I did want to go to medical school. And so I used to joke all the time. I was actually a sound engineer. And I used to say that I spent a lot of time sitting in a windowless room and I was kind of tired of it. And now I sit in a windowless room, but I think it is one that is much more intellectually fulfilling for me on a day-to-day basis. So after going to college and then working for a little bit, I applied to medical school. It's kind of a long process and kind of can talk about that as well. But this middle picture here is me on the first day of medical school. And this is something called the white coat ceremony. And it's a special ceremony that all medical students take at the beginning of medical school where we take the Hippocratic Oath, which is basically the concept of doctors that we do no harm to patients. And we get this short white coat that you wear throughout medical school. And then when you graduate, you get a long white coat. In my field of anesthesia, we don't really ever wear white coats in the operating room, but I do have them sitting somewhere deep in my closet. And the photo here on the right is me at the end of medical school. I was actually working on the anesthesia team at that time since I'd already decided that that's what I wanted to do. And we were working on the labor and delivery floor since anesthesia is responsible for pain management and epidurals on the labor and delivery floor. And this picture was actually taken on my birthday. I got to spend the day delivering babies on my own birthday, and that was a pretty cool birthday. And so here's the journey that I took to medicine, and everyone's is a little bit different. So I went to college for 4 years in upstate New York at Cornell University, and I did a lot of work doing research there. And then after that, I spent about 2.5 years working full time. I was studying for my MCAT. I worked in a lab at Columbia University. And then once I got into medical school, I spent 4 years in medical school. And then after that, you spend 4 or more years doing your residency training in whatever specialty you've chosen to pursue. For me, that was anesthesia. And then you also might choose to do a fellowship as well. So I'll kind of talk about that. So I want to harp on a few things. So the first part is how can you prepare for a career in medicine? What can you do outside the classroom that might help you get ready to apply to medical school? So, being pre-med is not a major in college. You can actually major in anything that you want to major in. And if you have an interest outside of medicine that you want to explore simultaneously, I would highly encourage you to do that. Instead, pre-med is just being taking a series of courses that you need to take to apply to medical school. And during that time, I also spent a lot of time doing music stuff, as I mentioned. I volunteered, I played music, I liked to do things that made me really happy. And that's what I would tell you. To prepare for applying to medical school, you should keep doing the things that you love that bring you joy. If that's kayaking, it's hiking, it's making art, whatever it is, you should keep doing that. It'll make you a more fulfilled doctor and just make you more ready to apply to medical school. The other things that you could do in college are things like working in a lab, as well as getting some experience shadowing doctors or being a scribe in a hospital, volunteering in a medical clinic. There's so many different things that you can do to get involved. And then once you're in medical school, you have to decide at some point what field of medicine to go into. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of go about making this decision. And I could probably spend an entire hour just talking to you about this one thing. And if you asked 100 doctors, everyone would probably give you a different answer. But so you know kind of the general process. In medical school, you rotate through lots of different fields. So you have to spend 2 to 8 weeks at a time doing surgery, OBGYN, pediatrics, psychiatry, all these different fields. And this picture on the left here, if you can see my mouse, is 5 of the many ID cards I acquired from working at different hospitals as a medical student. And for me, I started to think a lot about what environment I was most excited to practice medicine. So there's clinic, which is probably what most people are familiar with, going to see the doctor at an outpatient clinic. And then there's working with patients who are staying in the hospital. And then there's the operating room. And I just really enjoyed my time in the operating room. And I really enjoyed my time on the labor and delivery floor. But I knew I didn't want to be a surgeon. And so anesthesia felt like a really good choice. Someone told me that if my favorite place in the world was the operating room, I should be a surgeon. But if my favorite place in the hospital was the operating room, I should be an anesthesiologist. And I know it sounds kind of silly, but that just really clicked with me. It just felt totally, totally right. And I'm also happy to answer any questions about why anesthesia is the best field ever, even though I'm biased. But that's kind of the main story there. And then what happens after you finish medical school? So you've got this residency training and you apply and you pick your specialty. And you go through something called the match process. Maybe you've seen this on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, where people open an envelope and they find out where they're going to do their residency. It's all happens on the same day nationwide. And after spending a long time in New York City, I wanted to come to California just to try something new. And anesthesia is a 4-year residency program. So I knew I'd be committing to 4 years somewhere new. But every field of medicine is a little different. So if you want to do pediatrics, that's 3 years. Dermatology, being a skin doctor or being a anesthesiologist is 4 years. If you want to do surgery, you're looking more at like 5 to 8 years. And then you might choose to do additional training after residency called fellowship to subspecialize in an area even further. But in a couple slides, I'll tell you more about like what it's actually like to be a resident on a day-to-day basis. But I wouldn't have ever gotten here without some amazing mentors who um, became such great advocates for me and taught me so much about thinking like a scientist and being a scientist. Because even though I decided to go to medical school, I still very much think of myself as a physician scientist, as someone who still does a lot of research. So I want to emphasize how important it is to build, these mentors that you look up to, that you can ask questions to, that can help guide you through challenging decisions that you have to make. And the first one at the top here is my college mentor. I worked for her for all of college, and she taught me how to design my very first research study on my own and apply for my first grant to get funding for it. And we traveled all around upstate New York together, and we would have lunch together or dinner together. And I just really looked up to her. This picture is actually just taken in her backyard at my college graduation. She invited my whole family to come over, so she got to meet them. And then the picture on the right is me presenting the research that we did together in my last year of college. And then at the bottom, this is a lab that I worked in for 6 years at Columbia University. And all the way on the right here is my mentor. And he kind of took me under his wing. He gave me my first real job that helped me see what it would be like to work as a physician and as a researcher in an academic or university hospital rather than a local community hospital. And we got to write a lot of great research papers together. He wrote my college or my medical school letter of recommendation, and he's been such a great person to cheer me on all the way. I was the first person he ever hired full time, his first employee. So we kind of had a special relationship from that. And this picture on the right is during a time we traveled to Miami to present some research that we did on imaging in older adults, basically looking at the brains of older adults and how they change over time. I also wanted to just bring up that networking and building mentors is so, so important. And just to be so honest, like medicine is hard. It's really good to talk to people, but it's also so, so fulfilling. And it really fills my cup up every day, even on the hard days. And it's nice to have a community of people that you can talk to kind of about your experience. And I think this is just advice for life, whether you are interested in pursuing medicine or you're not. Um, if you talk to 10 people and their job does not sound remotely appealing to you, that might not be the right job for you. And that's totally okay. But it's going to give you so much more information about what decisions you want to make next. So, now to talk about all these years of schooling, what does my job actually look like today? And so I kind of walked you through it on the side, but I'd say around 6 a.m., I wake up, I throw on my scrubs really quickly and try and be out of the door within 8 to 10 minutes, and I drive to the hospital. And then at 6:30, I've gotten to work. I'll see my first patient. I'll tell them, like, this is what I'm thinking for the anesthesia. I want to answer questions for you. I want to make sure you haven't eaten anything or you've taken your meds today. And then I go set my operating room up for the surgery. You can see on this top picture on the right, this is a picture I took. I've got all these medications that I put in syringes here, and this is an anesthesia machine. It's actually a machine where I can help breathe for patients and deliver anesthesia at the same time. And I'm constantly making small adjustments on it in the operating room during the entire surgery. And this bottom photo here is kind of like showing what it's like when we put someone to sleep. We usually give them an oxygen mask and we use medication that goes through their IV to put them off to sleep. Here on the left is a picture of me in San Francisco at a research conference. This big bottle here is something called propofol. It's the most common anesthesia drug that we use IV, and there's this giant bottle of it that is a popular photo spot at this conference. And then the top photo here is a picture, this isn't me, but a picture of an anesthesiologist placing an epidural, which is something that we do for pain management for patients who are in the hospital. And we also do it for women who are giving birth. And so now it's 7:30, my patient gets into the OR and I start executing my plan. So that's going to be that oxygen mask. Maybe I have to place more IVs. Maybe I need to do a nerve block or an epidural, lots of different procedures that I can do. And I'll put my patient to sleep, of course. And then from about 7:30 to 4-ish, more or less, I'm in the operating room the whole time. And my day, I'm usually doing anywhere from like 1 to 4 surgeries a day. Sometimes it's like 7 or 8 if they're really short. Sometimes it's just one really, really long surgery. I've been in surgeries that lasted like 20 plus hours and been there the entire time. And then sometime between 4 and 9 p.m., I would say, I'm going home. I'll look at what cases I have to do for the next day and look at the patients and make sure I think that they're ready for anesthesia and start thinking about like what a good plan would be. I'll play with my dog. I'll maybe go to a workout class. I'll usually make dinner with my husband and then relax at home and do a little bit of reading. So the other thing that I tried to highlight here is just that even being in anesthesia, not every single day is in the OR. So you can find anesthesiologists on the labor and delivery floor, as I mentioned. You can find them in a pain management clinic for people who are just coming in because they have a lot of, back pain or other pain that they need a doctor to see them regularly for that. There's anesthesiologists doing nerve blocks for surgery. There's anesthesiologists who take care of patients in the ICU. There's so many different things that you could do every day. And I love my job because I see such cool things and I learn from the smartest people. And I just don't think people know what a cool job it is to be an anesthesiologist. So I'm here to spread the news to all of you guys. But there's obviously a lot of great things you can do in medicine. I just happen to pick this for a reason. But something that's so awesome to me is like every day I'm seeing different surgeries. So like if you name it, I've seen it. Heart surgery, bone surgery, plastic surgery, intestines, lungs, kids, anything it is. I love seeing it. I think it's really cool and I like to get to work with the surgeons and see all sorts of things. And I love guts and gore, which is really weird, but it makes being in the operating room kind of cool and fun. And then what happens after here? So I'm going to finish my residency in like about 5 months at UCLA. And I've learned so much, and yet there's still lots to learn. And then next year, I've actually chosen to do one extra year of training. I'm going to be going to Duke University across the country in North Carolina. And that's to focus mainly on doing nerve blocks and epidurals for patients, so managing their pain after surgery. I don't need to get into all the details for that, but there's lots of choices of what you can do after you do anesthesia residency. And that was just an area of anesthesia I'm really passionate about. And I wanted to kind of be a specialist in that area. And then after that, I'll start my job as an attending. And I've decided I want to work at like a university hospital similar to a Duke or to a UCLA or to USC. But you can work at any type of hospital. And this is just kind of the next step, but there's so many goals and aspirations I still have in my career. It's interesting because I think people think like, oh, once you go to medical school and you're a doctor, like you've got it all figured out. But I want to emphasize that medicine is like such a lifelong sport where you're a lifelong learner and there's always more to learn. And it's something that I really enjoy. And so there's much to learn. Things are going to change. I can work in lots of different types of hospitals with different patients. There's just a lot of different goals that I get to have. I want to keep doing research. I want to work doing like healthcare policy work and help, make the healthcare system better. And I used to think that like every step I got along the way would get a little bit easier. But once you get to like a finish line, you realize that you just kind of have another finish line. And I've come to learn that things actually do not get easier as you check more things off the list, but you get way better at doing hard things. And that's something that is really exciting and fulfilling. And so, just some general advice for pursuing a career in medicine. Medicine is a marathon, it is not a sprint. You have to be okay with delayed gratification. So, it's going to take longer to make more money than other friends that aren't working in medicine. It's tough and it's grueling, and you spend a lot of time in school, a lot of time, working weekends and nights. And so, you have to know that like there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but you have to be willing to wait in the long tunnel. I also just want to emphasize don't let anyone push you into medicine if that's not what you want to do. It is a long and challenging journey, and I would do it all over again because I truly love what I do. But you will only enjoy it if you want to do it, if it's really self-motivated. But if you do, you can totally do it, and everyone wants to cheer you on to make it happen. Shadowing doctors early, volunteering at a hospital, or maybe finding a lab to work in college. Those are things that kind of give you a sense of what it might be like to actually be a physician and gain more experience. And then I always tell people it's great if you consider taking some time off between college and medical school. You should enjoy your life before things get challenging for a bit. And it's just very few times in life that you get kind of a nice break like that. And there's a lot of things you can do in the interim that would be really fulfilling. But also, you never stop doing the things in life that make you happy outside of school or work. I think I notice happy physicians and not happy physicians. And one of the big things I notice is like how much people still do the things outside of work that matter to them. And I just wanted to show this picture on the right here. This is me and one of my medical school classmates. We both came to UCLA. He's a surgeon, and this picture we took in the operating room after we did our first case together a few years ago. So that was kind of a fun full circle moment. My number one piece of advice of all is to never stop learning. And that is true of all fields, but I think especially in medicine, always having the attitude that you can continue to strive for better, you can continue to learn more and do the best by your patient. I see some of these questions in the chat. So I'm going to answer this first one here about maximizing summer break. So in college, I did go back home. I did take some classes locally at home because I was studying music. I was splitting my classes between science and music. And so I needed to take some extra chemistry classes near where I grew up to kind of make it all work. But I think staying on campus and doing research is a great use of your time, especially if you go to a school where a lot of people like to stay for the summer. Like when I went to Cornell, people loved staying for the summer. It's beautiful in Ithaca during the summertime. So I'd highly encourage you to do that, especially because it will help you build an even stronger relationship with whomever you're working with during the year to get more of that full-time experience. You can also volunteer back home. And there are also a lot of different like grant programs that will help kind of pair you with a hospital or pair you with volunteer work. I am a firm believer that like doing any volunteer work kind of will demonstrate the ways in which you want to give back and help people. If you can shadow doctors and it can be in a medical setting, that's the best case scenario. But any type of volunteer work, I think, is going to help. Um, and then let's see, majoring in the arts. Yeah. So majoring in the arts, interestingly enough, this was not why I did it, but I have come to learn that the highest acceptance rate to medical school by major is actually music. And there's very few of us. There are only two people in at Cornell, me included, who majored in music and ended up going to medical school. And that's at a university of 16,000 undergrads. But I do think majoring in the arts kind of gives you a little bit of a leg up if that isn't, or just even like social sciences or something different just because it makes you really unique as an applicant. And I think it makes it makes your application more well-rounded. And I also think it gives you a better academic balance of your classes as an undergrad. It can be kind of tiring to take like all science classes all the time, especially if you're planning to go to medical school and take 4 more years of science classes. If you like history, you like English, like these skills and the way they teach you to be a good critical thinker in the arts and in like social sciences, I think will only make you a better medical school applicant overall. All right, I'm gonna see, did I miss any others? Okay, one more. Okay, so someone asked about pharmaceutical sales. Yeah, that's a great field too. I would say pharmaceutical sales is a great field, as is medical device sales. So that's kind of one thing that's helpful to differentiate. So pharmaceutical sales, these are people who sell products typically to physicians or PAs or other people or hospitals. Generally, there's like drugs, like actual like, medications themselves. And so you're likely working in an office-based setting, negotiating deals with them, et cetera. I think you can definitely find internships in either sales or just in pharma in general or any sort of hospital administration. Those I think would be great things to help build your resume towards working in pharmaceutical sales. I also bring up the idea of medical device sales because medical device sales is really cool and it's similar but a little bit different in that you're usually selling items that are used in the operating room. And so in a knee replacement, for example, a medical device sales rep will be in there and they will have sold this product to the surgeon, but they're in there every step of the way telling the surgeon, like, oh, actually, the product will work better if you turn it a little bit this way, or the way this screw connects is better than the way this screw connects. And so there's a really cool ability to be a sales rep, but also be in the operating room, just as another possible option. And then in terms of finding places to volunteer or gain experience, this is something that's been very challenging since COVID, in terms of being able to find places that will accept undergrads or high schoolers because it's tough to work in a medical facility. I happened, because I was in this science research program in high school, it helped me get a couple emails of mentors who had worked with other people in the past. And I was able to use those, reach out to those people via email for volunteering. But I've also heard about different virtual shadowing things. Being an EMT in college, because I see this kind of question here, is really, really great. Another awesome in is becoming a phlebotomist. Class, I think, is like a day or a weekend. And if you can have phlebotomy skills, which is basically like taking blood, that's going to make it much easier for you to get hired in a medical clinic or even just to get hired as a phlebotomist. Like, A, you'll get paid, and B, um, it's going to be a great segue into working in healthcare. If you email people, like keep emailing people. I tend to say that, like, as much as I would love to have, high schoolers shadow me, it's just not feasible in the hospital. And like the UCLA just wouldn't allow it. And so you're better off trying to find either like a private practice clinic or some sort of clinic, or even ask your own physician. I've done that before too. Those are all things that are helpful. There are also different like rehab facilities that staff physicians and nurses, et cetera, that are good options too. Okay, I'm gonna keep going and then we'll kind of like take another break and go back to some of those other questions as well about phlebotomy. And I think there's one more question too. So we'll do that. I just wanted to kind of share some of my friends' experiences, as I mentioned, and just tell you, I'll go through some of these slides a little bit faster so we can get to some of your questions, but I wanted to kind of walk you through lots of other different healthcare paths. So the first one is my friend Emily, who is an RN and she works at an IVF clinic helping women and men achieve their goal of having kids. And so she, from a young age, wanted to work in some sort of helping others, volunteer like capacity, and then ended up getting her degree in public health. And then she worked doing pharmaceutical stuff for 3 years. And then after that, I actually want to go back to nursing school, which is what she did. And so now she kind of like found her love of women's health. She worked on the labor and delivery floor as a nurse, and then now works in this IVF clinic to, help patients get pregnant, basically. I'm also happy to send these slides out to whoever wants to review them so you can kind of read some of them in more detail. So, kind of steps of becoming an RN. There's a couple paths. You can either go to an undergraduate nursing program and do it in 4 years and come out as an RN, or if you aren't sure yet, that's fine too. She decided to go to get her undergrad degree and she worked for a little bit, and then she went back to get her nursing degree as a master's, then worked, as I mentioned, as labor and delivery nurse, and then moved on to the IVF clinic. And so she has like what I would say is like a chiller job than maybe some RNs who are working with patients in the hospital, but she's helping patients administer fertility medicines, helping manage their medications that they need to take, talking them through the process, and then helping kind of do scheduling. She has a really nice work-life balance. She works 4 10-hour shifts a week. Definitely one of the benefits of nursing. There's unions that kind of help support them. They have good benefits, they get paid very nicely, and their schedule is a little bit more structured than being a physician. Her advice was that your career path is a journey, and if you trust your gut, you're going to figure it out. And here's a friend of mine who is a cancer genetic counselor. This was an area I didn't know a lot about before going into medicine, and I think is really cool. And so I wanted to share her path as well. So she was always interested in healthcare, and wanted to work with people, but she really fell in love with genetics from one of the classes she took in college, and that kind of led her down this path. Here you can kind of see some pictures of what genetic counseling looks like, and then also just some genetics information. A lot of information on this slide, but basically the general idea is that you go to college. She studied kind of a sciencey-ish topic and took her prerequisite classes. And then after that, she worked for a bit and then she went to grad school. And being a genetic counselor, it's a 2 year graduate program. And she did all sorts of rotations, very similar to medical school, in different types of genetic counseling. And then she did a couple of different jobs afterwards. She did pediatric genetic counseling, and now she works at UCLA with me doing cancer genetic counseling. Basically, people who have history of cancer in their family, who have genes that maybe make it more high risk or likely that they're going to get cancer. She kind of helps them navigate that entire path and let them know like what is their risk? What is their family member's risk? What would their risk be like if they had a kid? And so she spends a lot of her time seeing patients in the clinic in the morning. And then in the afternoon, she's basically kind of following up with patients, writing notes for patients in the medical chart, placing orders, more admin oriented tasks. Her hours are very, I'd say 8 to 4 or 9 to 5, a little bit more traditional. She doesn't have to be on call. She doesn't work any weekends, and she gets to build relationships over a period of time with the patients that she takes care of. She recommended volunteering, trying things out early, building people skills, and then always staying curious. Again, same concept. Lifelong learning is really important. My close friend Danielle is a pediatric nurse practitioner, and she's always loved kids. And she decided to get her doctorate in nursing. And she knew she wanted to do something in medicine, knew she wanted to do it with kids. That was something super important to her. And she liked the idea of becoming an NP because the path was just a little bit less long, a little bit less daunting than doing medicine, and gives her still a lot of independence. So again, lots of information, and again, happy to send these out so you can read them more thoroughly if you want. But she went to college, and then after that, she applied to like master's degree programs and doctorate programs. And she spent about 3 years in school, working part-time and doing school part-time, while she basically got her RN first and then continued along with school, and working part-time to get her doctorate. And the benefit of getting your doctorate in nursing is that she can actually practice independently. So that's something here. So by getting her doctorate, she did more clinical hours, she spent more time in school, but she's able to teach nursing. And then she also is able to, practice on her own, see patients by herself. She doesn't need to work necessarily with a physician in order to do that. And then a day in her life, she worked first in pediatric endocrinology. She worked a lot with kids with thyroid disease, kids with diabetes, kind of helping manage different hormones and working with kids and their parents. And then she moved and now does primary care. So she does a lot of like seeing patients regularly, building relationships with them. She sees 10 to 20 patients a day, so it's a good amount of patients. She works usually 7:30 or 8 o'clock to 3 or 4 p.m., 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. And occasionally she'll volunteer to work Saturday for some extra money, but it's not an option. I mean, it's not a requirement for her, the way that it's a little bit more of a requirement for me. Her path was a little bit faster, and she was able to practice and kind of be in her full-time job a little sooner than me. And she, thought a lot about different medical career paths and different options that helped align a lot with like her personal life and personal goals. She felt like she just wasn't going to be happy spending 4 more years in medical school and doing a tough residency wasn't appealing to her. And she just kind of wanted to like get to her goal sooner. And this was an amazing option for her. And then definitely, as many people have said, try and shadow, always a good way. My friend Leah is a physician assistant, and in her case, her dad's a doctor, and she felt like she had a lot of goals in life that she wanted to achieve, and she wanted to be able to take care of patients a little sooner than the medical school path. And so she decided to become a PA. And she shared that by 26, she was able to get married and have a dog and be working in the ICU, doing something that makes her really happy. So to become a PA, she spent 4 years doing undergrad, and then she spent a lot of time doing patient care hours. That's one thing I'll mention is that if you want to go to PA school, there's a very, very high requirement for the amount of clinical hours you need to have worked before you can apply. It's not unreasonable, but it's very likely you're going to need to work between college and going to PA school. PA school is usually a master's degree program. It lasts 2 to 3 years. And then now she's been spending 2 years working in the ICU, and also doing some urgent care work as well. She just moved, so she just took this new job taking care of inpatients, but not in the ICU. When she was working in the ICU, she spent a lot of time working nights. So she would get admissions from the emergency room or from the operating room. And she would go, prepare plans for all these new patients. She would manage their ventilators. She would do procedures very similar to the types of things I do in the operating room. And then she's working with a physician who's basically overseeing her throughout the course of her shift and her day. She also recommended trying all these different paths because there's many of them. School's a little bit shorter, but it's condensed, and I'd say it's a pretty grueling curriculum. You're sometimes in medical school in classes with PA students as well, and I can see how quick they have to move their curriculum to get done sooner. And the thing that she really likes about it, and something I think people like a lot about being a PA, is that you can always change fields. You're not stuck in one field. It's kind of similar to being a nurse practitioner. Whereas in medicine, once you decide on your field, like that's the field that you're going to do for your career. And you're a little bit more limited in making changes unless you want to redo residency, which is an option, but not super popular. The last friend I'm going to tell you about is my friend Jillian. She's a neuroscientist and she really liked her psychology degree undergrad. And then she worked in a lab working with hamsters and mice, performing surgery on hamsters and mice. This is a picture of her doing surgery on a hamster. Um, and so she was really excited about like the research aspect of things, even more than working with patients. So she went to college, she got her undergrad degree, and then she spent a long time working. She spent 8 years working and then came to California to USC to go get her PhD, which she's almost done with. And she studies how women's brains change during menopause and over time. So for her, something that she likes about her day to day is it's very, science oriented. It's very flexible. It's not patient facing, but she really gets to enjoy the true science of things. She creates her own schedule. She'll travel to present her research at different conferences. And it is something that as she mentioned, is important to this career path. There definitely is travel involved in what she does, but she gets to lead all sorts of cool research studies about women's brains and is having a really good time. And she was saying, you should cold email people. It's always good to reach out to people that way. Worst case, you don't get an email back, and always try different things. She really liked that she got to work for some time before she went to graduate school. And so she also highly encouraged that as well. Two more slides, I promise. And then I wanted to just bring up some amazing healthcare options that we didn't really get to cover today. As I mentioned, I felt growing up like no one gave me any other options other than going to medical school. And as much as I love it, I think everyone should get to know about all their options. So I've had friends who went to school for social work, nutrition. You can also be a technician in surgery, but not go to nursing school and kind of be more focused on being in the operating room, but less patient oriented, or in the emergency room. You can also go to nursing school and then get your doctorate and become a nurse anesthetist. Great career path, great hours. You can be an EMT. You can be a physical therapist in the hospital or in a clinic, a speech pathologist. You can work in hospital administration. You can work in dentistry. You can work in veterinary medicine. You can go to ultrasound school or radiation technician school to work in an imaging setting where you do all the imaging for doctors. And you evaluate it and you set up all the different imaging protocols, whether that's investigating people's hearts, doing all the ultrasound for women who are pregnant, and making sure that everything looks good and is very thorough. These are like really experts in imaging. And then there's also something called neuromonitoring. If you want to read brain signals in the operating room and tell the surgeons and the anesthesiologist about it, that's an option. You can also be a midwife and help deliver babies in birthing centers or at home or in other places. But I just wanted to, highlight a lot of these options that you can see in the pictures here, and that the day to day in these fields are all so different. And working in science or working in healthcare can mean so many different things. And you can start by thinking like, do I want to work with patients or do I want to do research? If you're someone who like has always said, I want to help people, I want to work in medicine, but you're scared of needles, for example, there's so many things that you can do without having to be exposed to blood all the time. There's lots of options. There's many different paths, many. very tremendously. But something that is great about the healthcare field is that healthcare workers are always in demand all around the country. So you really can work anywhere that you want to work. It's not like some industries that are very focused on certain cities. We need healthcare in rural communities, in suburban communities, in urban communities, and you can always be, in demand in whatever field you go into, which is a huge perk. So I want to say thank you for listening. If you guys ever want to talk about medicine or any healthcare career, you can always reach out to me. I'd love to help you. I'd also love to help connect you with someone who maybe aligns with the goals of what you're trying to reach. And in every presentation, I include a picture of my dog. This is Walter over here. He's always a really fun, happy guy I get to see at the end of the day. And I really enjoy having a dog. It brings a lot of joy to me, even after a hard day at the hospital. So that's my PowerPoint presentation. I know it's kind of long, but we still have a good chunk of time to do some questions.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was so great, so informative, so amazing. Super, super in awe of all the work you do and all the amazing work your friends do.
Happy, happy, happy to help. I know there's some questions here.
Yes.
I just wanted to pause and say I'm always happy to read the questions in the chat. I'm also always happy to hear new voices. If anyone wants to unmute and ask a question on audio, I'd love to hear from you. And we can chat that way. I'll give you guys a couple seconds. And then if no one unmutes, we can go through the questions in the chat.
Yes, please feel free to unmute. If you can't show your video, that's okay. But feel free to unmute yourselves.
Any takers? I'm not scary.
You have covered a lot within your slides and also mentioning your friends. So it's like, it's not a question that I actually have, only because if I did, you had 100% answered it.
No, that's totally fine. I tried to be as comprehensive as possible so that way you guys know about all the options and also just like as a like helpful reminder, like I work with all of these different people, like even though I spend a lot of time working with surgeons, like I work with the nurses every single day. They're the ones who are seeing my patient even before I do in the pre-op area. And then sometimes we have a patient and they don't have a ride home. And then I need to call social work and say, what's a safe way we can get this patient home? Or should we keep them in the hospital? Or I'm concerned because they have a lot of stairs at home and they just had knee surgery. Maybe home isn't the best place for them. Let's see if we can get them to like a nursing facility for a couple weeks. So we're always like working together, and it's something that brings me lots of joy of working in the hospital. And there's just so many cool things you could do. So I know Valerie talked a little bit about kind of volunteering and gaining experience, and I shared a little bit about kind of like how I started. I will say I kind of had some helpful things. Like I had someone I went to college with, his dad was a doctor, and I was like, could I email him and ask him about it? And another friend of mine from college, her dad was a doctor. And so I tried to reach out to as many people as I could who I like had a connection with, or even my own doctor, as I mentioned, who always invited me to come shadow her in the pediatrics clinic when I was growing up. Um, that's been helpful. And it's really, really just gotten so much harder since COVID. I do think that most colleges have some sort of either like pre-med fraternity or like pre-health organization that usually has a really helpful pipeline because now you're talking about like tons and tons of alumni who have worked in labs or done volunteering who will pass along their connections. And although I wasn't really involved with that at Cornell, it is a very popular thing to do if you're interested in any health career and I would highly recommend doing something like that. Um, and it is really hard though with some of this licensure. But I know that there's another thing about kind of getting the phlebotomy certification. Hold on, I'm just reading this paragraph. Clinical hours, okay. Yeah, I think everything else you're doing is actually amazing. I think that's like literally perfect. I work with a lot of medical school applicants and help them with their medical school applications. And I always like to tell people that like every applicant doesn't need to be every single thing. I'm working with an applicant now, and she's really, really passionate about women's health and, women's health related advocacy and access to prenatal care in rural communities. That's amazing. That's awesome. She's not as interested in research. That's totally fine. And so when we were working on her application, I was helping her like lean into the things that she's really passionate about and the things that she brings to the table as an applicant. You don't need to check every single box. I've had other applicants who like weren't as passionate about some of these like healthcare, socio-political issues in our industry, and they were like loved working in labs with mice. Amazing. We leaned into that when we sent in their application. And so with your kind of phlebotomy stuff that you're doing and getting your MA certification, like if you want to take a more clinical angle to things, that's great. I think you should keep working along the path that you're doing, especially because it sounds like you already have a potentially great mentor to kind of help you keep moving along. And you should definitely keep working with that mentor. The better you get to know them, the more they know you when they, hopefully write that letter of recommendation for you when you apply to medical school, even better. And so even things like I was in medical school during COVID, and what I did is I actually volunteered a lot as a COVID vaccinator because not everybody can administer a vaccine. If you're an MA, 100% you can administer a vaccine. Places would be happy to have you. Now, that was a little bit of a niche time because there were like these mass vaccination efforts. And so I spent like usually 2 days a week just going, I'd vaccinate like hundreds of people. And we would do them in like churches in New York City and community centers, and people would come on through and we just do tons and tons and tons of vaccines. So I actually got a lot of like experience in medical school doing that, but we got some high schoolers involved with this program, helping, just even things like checking people in, answering their questions about the vaccines. We were able to like integrate people who wanted volunteer experience. So I think you're doing so many amazing things. If you wanted to get some experience doing research, that could be a great addition to your application if it's something that, suits your goals and things that make you happy, but it's by no means a requirement. Um, and the other thing I'll say, I see you said about wanting to go to medical school, which obviously I'm all for because I think it's a great career path, is if I could give one piece of advice, it's just to always be open-minded when it comes to specialties. Even when I have people applying to medical school, and I just coached someone for their interview two nights ago, and she is like really, really particular about like, maybe you want to like psychiatry. And I was like, that is so awesome. But I want you to say on the interview that you've had a lot of exposure to psychiatry and it's an area of great interest to you, but you're open-minded and excited to try all the different things. And I think just the more open-minded you are, it's just going to, make you enjoy the whole process along the way. And then um certificate while fulfilling your prereqs. I think if you want to do a phlebotomy certificate or an MA certificate, very reasonable. And I say that just because it gives you the option of like getting a job. Like if you work as an MA, even part-time or like random shifts here and there, you can definitely make a little bit of nice money. It's expensive to apply to medical school. So those things are really helpful. But as far as like if you don't want to be an EMT, don't be an EMT. You don't need to do that. You can go work in a lab and that's great and spend a little bit of time shadowing. If you've shadowed, 10 to 20 hours of time before you apply to medical school, that's okay. Not everyone's coming in with the same amount of experience, but tapping into what your undergrad has, I think is a really good starting point if you're looking for more clinical experience. Also, depending on where you go to school, many schools have some sort of local hospital. Great if it's their affiliated university hospital, even easier, because it's easier to email those people that are already in your network when you're also emailing with an at ucla.edu email. But also, any local hospitals is great. Like that's totally, totally fine. Um, I I wish I like I did much more of my volunteer stuff prior to applying to medical school when I was living back at home in New York City. And so I'm a little less familiar with some of the paths here, but I know that there definitely are summer programs, even like job websites like Indeed, for example. If you search like clinic assistant, I would be surprised if you couldn't find like a job just like helping answer the phone and scheduling patients in a clinic somewhere. Even doing that just a little bit here and there, those are like hugely helpful things. I also don't want to underestimate the value of any type of job. Of course, when you're applying to medical school, people get competitive and they need X amount of hours and this many extracurriculars. And those things to some extent are true. You obviously do need some amount of exposure to the field in whatever way that it is for you. But if you work waiting tables, or I worked actually like at my dance studio answering the phone at the front desk. And I did that to make a little bit of extra money. That's great. Like people just want to see that you're motivated and that you're working. It all adds to your life story. Like I had to take off an entire semester of college for like an injury on my arm for which I was in a cast and couldn't move my arm for like multiple months. And that alone, like what it was like to just be a patient in the hospital and then go through that whole process gave me like all sorts of different experiences. And when I was off of school, like I couldn't volunteer doing shadowing to build my medical school application. So I worked at the front desk. I answered phones. That's what I could do. I made some money. I got to be around some old dance teachers that I knew and like I did what I could do at the time. And sometimes like just everyone's just doing the best thing that they can do. But any type of work experience you will get will be great. As I mentioned, with like taking time off after, but if you're going to apply to PA school or medical school or whatever it is, that's a really good time to consider taking a job at a place like UCLA, working in a lab, similar to what I did at Columbia. There are the very lab oriented ones, like my friend Jillian, who was working with hamsters, neurosurgery stuff. I didn't really want to do that personally. Nothing against that, not my thing. I like much more enjoyed working with patients, and I was working with patients with dementia and basically doing different neuro assessments and imaging for them. And I feel like I got a lot of good exposure to research. I saw what it would be like to kind of be interacting with patients and building relationships. And these are all things that are kind of helpful in your decision. In terms of standing out for research, I think showcasing the things that you do have, or even just like any type of volunteer stuff you can get. Like I said, if you can like spend a day or two in a clinic, amazing. That would like vastly help your chances at getting one of those internships. But even like I said, looking for things at Indeed, playing to the strengths that you do have, maybe like you just don't have the healthcare experience right now that's going to get you a job in a hospital, but like maybe you could get a internship working for the LA Department of Health, like doing public health work. You could work in nonprofit for a nonprofit company that does all, different health services. There's tons and tons of that. It could be a nonprofit that helps connect older adults with meals. Like it could be anything. Like these are all things that like move you forward towards your goal and are going to help you get closer to getting an internship in medicine. A lot of universities will offer some sort of summer research stipend, and getting involved in a lab at your local university, very, very helpful for opening doors as well. It's been really challenging since COVID. That is like probably the biggest change I've noticed for applicants trying to get it, like opportunities. But I want to just remind you that it's not just you, it's everybody is going through the same process. And California in particular, for better, for worse, like is a challenging state to be in sometimes because you guys have a lot of medical schools, but it's also so competitive to go to public medical school in California. And just remembering that like there's a ton of medical schools in the country, maybe, leaving for a little bit is a good option, or maybe taking a summer internship elsewhere if you're able to, go to a program that provides some stipend or funding for it, even at another university, working in a lab or something would be like super, super beneficial. But whatever you can do, just being passionate and kind of like doing your best, they're all moving you closer to your goal. Um, oh yeah, okay. So Kayla brought up a good point. What's the difference between being an anesthesiologist and an anesthesia assistant? So that's super helpful. So there's the kind of three ways to practice anesthesia. There's what I do, which is you go to medical school and you become an anesthesiologist and you take lots of board tests and you can do all the different things in anesthesia and you kind of are like overseeing the other anesthesia providers. So I can work independently. I can supervise residents when I finish residency in 6 months, that is. And I'll be able to supervise nurse anesthetists and anesthesia assistants. So not every state has anesthesia assistants. This is something that is likely to be new to California. I was working with the California Society of Anesthesia to help actually get this bill signed so that way we can bring anesthesia assistants to California. The difference is the schooling and the path to get there. So I go to undergrad for 4 years and then go to medical school for 4 years and then do 4 years of residency. So let's call that 12 years. If you want to be a nurse anesthetist, you're going to go, let's say you go to undergrad nursing school. So that's 4 years. Then you need to work in the ICU for 2 years. And then you can go get your doctorate to become a CRNA. And that's 3 years. And then you can immediately practice, no residency training needed. So we've shortened the path now. that's like 9 years. So you've just saved yourself a few years and some loans in that process. Being an anesthesia assistant, similar more or less to being a CRNA, it's just that their education's a little different. So you'd have to go to nursing school to be a CRNA, but to be an anesthesia assistant, you have to take your pre-med classes actually, and then you go to school, I think, for 2 more years. You need a certain amount of clinical hours before you can apply to a master's program to be an AA. And then you can go and same thing, you do rotations, but all rotations in anesthesia, and then basically you'll practice under the license of an anesthesiologist, like an MD or DO anesthesiologist who's gone to medical school. Um, like I said, not every state has them. Anesthesia assistants are currently in like 20 something states. They're becoming more popular overall. Nurse anesthetists have become even more popular overall too. So I think they're all great options. One benefit I would say of being a nurse anesthetist is that you are protected by the nursing union. So you get more nursing like schedules, like usually nurses work, maybe 3 12-hour shifts a week. And that varies a little bit depending on the union and kind of the benefits that you get from that. But you have like a really powerful, great union behind you. And you also have your nursing background, which obviously kind of, opens other doors for you in terms of the types of things that you can do with your degree. Being an anesthesia assistant, again, saves you time because it's a shorter process. So now we're talking even shorter. We could probably say it's probably like 7 years even post high school to become an anesthesia assistant. But you don't have a nursing union. I'm not exactly sure if some states they're unionized or not, but the pay between CRNAs and anesthesia assistants is actually fairly similar in most states. It's just a little bit different of like the licensure and the structuring. Not one is not like superior than the other. It's just about like what path is correct for you. Our hope with this bill is that anesthesia assistants will be coming to California in a year's time, but I need to do a checkup on that and see where that stands.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you so much, Julia. I know
no
we're already
problem.
at time. I want to make sure, we honor the time we asked you to be with us. If
Of
there's another
course.
question or one last question or any last piece of advice you'd like to share, you're welcome.
I am just here to share that I am cheering you on. I think healthcare is an amazing field. I'm so proud to be a part of it. I just truly, 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 I hope it comes across in this presentation just how much I really love what I do, even on the worst days. And I really am happy to connect with any of you guys. I would love to be helpful. I learned a lot as far as like no one in my family ever going to medicine, like no one including myself, honestly had a good sense of kind of like what I could do, what the path was going to look like. And like all I want to do is pay it forward to people and help, give them their advice and help them on their journey. I'm still on my journey, and I hope that one day we can be colleagues together in a hospital setting.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Of
We
course.
appreciate and we're so grateful for your time. I know
Anytime,
this is not the last time we're gonna see you, and
for
hopefully
sure.
in the future we can see you in person. Thank you so much for
Definitely.
your time.
No problem. And feel free, I can send you the slides. You can definitely pass along my contact
Yeah.
information. Like I said, happy to connect any of you guys in any way.